Most woodworkers eventually consider taking on a large project. I don't just mean a big piece of furniture like a bed. I mean a kitchen full of cabinets, or an entire dining room set, or a room full of furniture. This can be sort of intimidating. Even if you've successfully built a cabinet or an end table, a kitchen full of 20 cabinets, or a full living room set with 2 end tables and a coffee table and maybe a television stand, it just can feel overwhelming and different. But it doesn't have to be. There are things you can do to make large projects much easier and a great deal faster to build. We've been working on a large furniture project for the office here in the workshop. It includes 11 pieces of furniture in 5 different forms. It's built in an early 20th century craftsman style with frame and panel construction, which means there are hundreds of pieces, and this can easily be overwhelming. But we've structured the project for efficiency from the design through the entire process. And there are several lessons here that you may be able to use in your next large project, whether it be that set of kitchen cabinets or that 7-piece dining set. We'll discuss some of these lessons over the next several weeks as this project progresses. This time, we'll examine how design can greatly affect the speed and efficiency of the project itself. I'm not just talking about getting it done sooner. Not everybody's facing a deadline. An efficient process, though, can reduce mistakes, which can save you a great deal of frustration and wasted material and money. Factory-built furniture is designed with this efficiency in mind. Everything from the size of the parts to the joinery is standardized as much as possible to reduce the number of machine setups and make it possible to batch out loads of identical parts. These principles can be applied to your shop projects in your workshop if you begin with the design itself. I designed this furniture to be functional and attractive, but I also designed it with the build process in mind. It's not really 11 individual pieces. They're standardized into 5 types. We have 4 identical wall cabinets, 3 identical base cabinets, 2 identical tables, a desk, and a file cabinet. These 5 types are further standardized in the way they're constructed. All of it is based on the simple frame and panel. Each panel is made up of 2 rails, 2 stiles, and a center panel. While one panel assembly may be large, such as the back of the cabinet, another may be small, such as one of the doors, but they're all basically the same in many ways. Each frame has 2 horizontal rails and 2 vertical stiles. All of the rails and stiles, no matter where they are in the project, are 1.5 inches wide. Most of them also have the same 1/4-inch groove along the edge. And all the rails have 1/4-inch tenons on the ends. Yes, there are differences in overall lengths of various rails and stiles, but set that aside and focus on what's the same. What can be batched out using a single tool setup? Well, we know that all the stiles and rails are the same thickness. So that was the first step, to just mill up a bunch of white oak to 3/4 of an inch thick. We also know that all the rails and stiles are the same width. So the next step was to rip a bunch of that oak into 1.5 inch wide strips. Of course, we do have variation in length, but you can divide that into groups of matching parts. For example, all the stiles on the back panels, the side panels, and the face frames are 29 inches long. That's 8 per cabinet, 32 in the 4-cabinet set. The upper and lower rails on the back panels and face frames are all 29 3/4 inch long. There are 16 of those in these 4 cabinets. There are also 16 6-inch long rails for the side panels, 16 8.5 inch rails for the doors, and 16 12 7/8 inch stiles for the doors. All the many rails and stiles in these various frames can therefore be divided into 5 groups of identical parts, and each group may be batched out using a stop block to ensure they're all cut to the same length. So it only takes about 5 or 10 minutes to cut all of these parts to length, regardless of how long they are. Now we can move on to the joinery. This is standardized as well. All the back panels, side panels, and doors are the same as respects joinery. A groove is plowed down the edge of each vertical stile and horizontal rail. This is all done with a single table saw setup regardless of the length of the piece. Now each horizontal rail receives a tenon on each end. Again, this is done with one table saw setup regardless of whether it's a short door rail or a long back rail. By keeping as much of the joinery the same as possible, the project is greatly simplified. You're not cutting 32 door tenons and 16 back panel tenons or whatever. You're cutting 96 identical tenons with a single setup. Of course, that doesn't mean you can't introduce variations. For example, the backs and sides all receive a center panel, but the face frames do not. That means you can't cut a groove down the full length of the front stiles as you did on all the other parts. Those 8 pieces were set aside, and they received stop grooves at the router table, again with the stop block to ensure each part came out the same. This added an extra step to the process. But overall, a very complex set of cabinets with many different parts required only a relatively small number of machine setups, all in, including thicknessing the parts, cutting the strips to width and length, cutting the full-length grooves, cutting the stop grooves, and cutting the tenons, required just 10 machine setups for all those steps on all those parts. If you add in the fence settings to cut your square panels and your 2 solid wood shelves, it comes out to just 19 setups for a whole wall of cabinets. How many times do you usually move your table saw fence or adjust your blade height or your router table setup in a single project? I bet more than 19 for a project this size. But here's where it really starts to get interesting. The base cabinets are all built with the same frame and panel construction, as is the file cabinet, as are the tables, as is the desk. The whole project is just a series of rails and stiles of the exact same thickness, the exact same width, with the exact same grooves and the exact same tenons. So instead of batching out 96 identical tenons for the cabinet joinery, you could batch out all the tenons in the entire project, hundreds of them, with a single setup. Likewise, those full-length grooves and those stopped grooves, all with a single setup in large batches. So with proper planning, you can turn your small shop into a little small-scale production factory. You're no longer making 12 separate pieces of furniture. You're making 10 of one part, 20 of another, 30 of another, parts which will then be assembled to make panels, and then those panels assembled to make different forms of furniture. This way, an entire room of furniture with hundreds of parts can be built in a surprisingly fast time with a small number of machine setups, greatly reducing mistakes and saving you money. Now, how can you apply this to a project you plan on building? Try to standardize your design so you can make identical or similar parts in batches. If you aren't designing the project yourself, you may still be able to tweak the design to make all the tenons the same thickness, for example. Even if the project contains many different parts, look for ways you can combine them into groups. Remember how I cut all the stiles and rails to width first because that was something they all had in common as one big group. Then I divided that big group into smaller groups of common length. Then I separated those groups into smaller groups that received common joinery. There are, of course, many other things you can do to make a large project go more smoothly, and we'll discuss those in a future video. See you next time. This is a Koenigsegg, Sweden's finest sports car. This is a Jobergs, Sweden's finest workbench. They are things for people who appreciate quality and high performance, something they can pass down to their grandkids. You can't afford this, but this will cost you less than a good cabinet saw. Check out what Jobergs has to offer at the link below this video. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.